Good morning, everybody on YouTube. This is Rick Thomas from Obsolete Video Services. I get a lot of emails about this particular question, so we're going to do a video on this. I'm trying to do videos to break it up for you guys, to answer your questions, give you an idea if I fix something and I charge a certain amount, it's because it's very involved, it's expensive, it's not cheap, it's not easy to do. So my rates for various different repairs, and this will kind of break it down for you, give you an idea. When I work on something or I fix something or I restore something, it's very time consuming, it's very expensive most of the time. Most of the time you need donor equipment to scrap out for other parts to build one, such as the cartridge vision. I must have into that unit. That cartridge vision, I put 1,000 in just in parts alone, but buying those units, I bought 2 of them off eBay. It cost me like $1,000 a piece, which were complete junk. I've had 2 donated, and I had another one I think I bought. So I got something like into this cartridge vision machine, literally about $6,000 or $7,000 just cash to get this machine to where it's at. So to answer the question about the cartridge vision, I put a ton of money into this just to get this thing to where it's working in the situation it's in right now. Because I do get calls from customer tapes that was shot with the camera that used to come with the TV sets, and they got like home footage or very rare archive footage on these, and they need them recovered. It's the only reason I spent and went through so much trouble to restore this cartridge vision machine. But anyways, people are asking about prices, what do I charge, and they think it's expensive. Well, actually what I charge is very, very cheap compared to what goes into the work to do this stuff, okay? Seriously, restoration work or even electronic repair work, in this day and age, ballpark, just for people to take the trouble to work on it, under $1,000 is really cheap. So if I do like a restoration, say it's to restore something vintage and it's like a reel-to-reel or something like that, I charge you $1,200 to do the restoration. That is cheap due to the work that you have to do, the time that it takes to do it, getting the parts, putting it all together, the know-how, the years of me doing this stuff, my time. You're literally getting away with murder with the prices I'm charging. So if you guys think the prices are too high, you're not even close. The prices are very, very cheap. All right. Let me explain to you guys about components and parts and prices and all that kind of stuff. I have to buy a lot of parts in bulk. As you can see, I have a lot of capacitors sitting here, and I've got a lot more of these with various different types. When you work on a machine that's 50, 60 plus years old, 9 times out of 10, all the capacitors are complete shit, and you have to replace them. Seriously. They may work, and you're like, okay, fine. Okay, if you want to leave them in there and give it a shot, and 4 months later they blow up or start leaking, that's your problem. I don't do anything half-assed. If I'm going to fix it, if it's something that's vintage like a cartridge vision, I'm going to swap out all the capacitors and reset the machine. Because if you're going to be using the machine, you don't want to have to revisit and go back to doing all that work because you were stupid or too stupid to buy capacitors, which are really not that expensive these days, depending on which ones you get, to recap the machine. Okay. As you can see, I got a lot of capacitors. I do buy them in bulk. I go on eBay. I also use a place called NTE Electronics. They have a cross-reference website that you can cross-reference a component, and they'll tell you what their cross-reference is. And if you go on eBay or search anywhere else, you can look for the best price for the component, and they come in little packs like this. Like these are diodes. These are NTE 177s, which cross to all these different numbers. And it gives you a way of shopping at your best price, getting things at a cheaper rate because you're buying so much of this stuff. You don't want to spend a fortune on components, right? So NTE, you can get a lot of parts on cross-references from the original. I get a lot of NTE stuff to replace a lot of the originals. Some of these original transistors and components are pretty expensive, especially when you're swapping out a lot of them. So you want to go with the best prices. NTE is a fantastic source. www.nteinc.com. www.nteinc.com. You can look up any component on their website, and they'll give you their cross number, and then you can take this cross number and go on eBay or wherever you want to search to buy the part. I mean, NTE is a great source for replacement electronics. I don't get my capacitors through NTE. I get my capacitors off eBay. I do buy in bulk, or I go to Ted's Electronics, which I've told you guys in the past. You try to buy in bulk because 9 times out of 10 you're going to get 20 different spots that's going to take the same capacitor. So you want to have enough that's going to do the job. Like on this Cartrovision, this 10 microfarad axle lead capacitor, I think there was like 8 of them. And so I bought in bulk. I didn't have to worry about being short on the parts that I needed. Or when it comes to like these can electrolytics, these section can electrolytics, on vintage electronics, these are almost always shit, okay? All the time, because they're so old. I mean, they may work for a little while, but they're not gonna last. They will go crappy on you and start failing, and you have to change them out anyways. So I go to like Ted's Electronics for the multi-section capacitors. They got a great selection. Sometimes eBay, they do have some that Ted's might not have, but sometimes you want to use the original replacements on these multi-section cans and just replace the can exactly. You can do that. Or do yourself a favor, wire it up with the same values underneath the capacitor, keep the can in place, just snip the wires, and put capacitors underneath it that replace the sections of the microfarads that you need. That way you don't have to take the can and replace it and buy these real expensive multi-section cans. So there's a lot of little ways you can cheat replacing these can capacitors. You could do it with separate sections underneath, snip the wires, leave the can in place, or go online and buy the multi-section capacitor and replace it. Capacitors, you could buy in bulk. You get them on eBay, through Ted's, a lot of different sources online. Parts Unlimited sells a lot of capacitors. But make sure when you get components, you buy in bulk. Or if you're getting transistors of various things, you could use NTE's website, www.nteinc.com, to cross-reference the transistor you have. If it's a funky number and you can't find it like on eBay or something like that. This is how I do my work. Try to make sure I have enough on hand. But if I'm doing a component replacement on a piece of equipment like capacitors and various different things, to bring a piece of component back to the way it was, and it takes a bunch of capacitors. You know, I charge $1,000 plus to do that. It's time consuming, it's very expensive, and it's not easy work. It takes a long time, especially when you're trying to fix something that's very valuable, a piece of equipment that you're really not going to find a replacement that's going to be of that value. So say it's a piece of electronics I fix and I charge $1,000 to fix it. That piece of equipment might value at $3,000 or $4,000 because it's a high-rated piece of equipment. And you most likely are not going to find a piece of equipment that's equivalent to that, that's not going to be in that price range. So you're better off to let me fix it for that price than you are to waste the money on buying another piece of equipment at $3,000 or $4,000. So I hope this kind of breaks it down to you guys, why I charge the rates I do. You actually are getting a deal. Trust me, you're getting a big deal on this work. And compared to the comparative of buying a replacement, which would cost you almost 3 times that amount of money. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video.